Yo, welcome back everybody to another part of the course. Today I have something really exciting for you guys. We're going to be learning a really cool performance enhancing list view called RecyclerListView. This is freaking amazing for if you want to render huge lists and if you want to render lists with individual grid cells. But we're not going to be doing individual grid cells today. We are going to be rendering anime recommendations using RecyclerListView and hooks. So let me just show you guys what we're going to be building. So if I go into, let's say, School Rumble right here, I've created this recommendation that basically pulls all the data from the Jacan API that gives us recommendations for that specific anime, and I can see all of the associated animes to that. And if I go to, let's say, Neon Genesis, I can see all the ones associated with that. Let's go to something like Naruto, and we should be able to see everything like that as well. So, and you can see that there's no frame droppage even though I'm like scrolling as fast as I possibly can. All the images are cached, and without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So before we do begin, there's just a couple of changes that I made off screen. I'll just tell you about them right now. I changed this from dimensions for screen.height to be 250. I put the title at the very top. It doesn't matter if there's a trailer or no trailer, it'll still show the title of the actual anime. And if there's no trailer, it'll just show the image of that anime. So for example, Naruto has no trailer, it'll just show the image of that anime right there, and it's all aligned center. Basically I converted this into a parent container, basically gave it the styles called center content, and which is equal to justified content center, align item center, which basically just centerized all that stuff. Not too complicated, pretty basic stuff. Now let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so now what we have to do is we have to create the query to get all of the recommended anime. So I'm going to create a new file and call it get all recommended animes.js. And this is going to be very similar to the previous tutorials where we were pulling all the data for all the other anime. So let me see if I can copy let's copy this one right here. So our get selected info query, paste it into here, and let's change the ending to be recommendations as opposed to full. And let's change this name from selected anime URL to be recommended anime URL. And then after that, let's change this name. Let's call it get anime recommendations, and then let's copy and paste it here, and then we're just gonna go ahead and use it. So use get anime recommendations query, like so. Give it a new name. Let's call it recommend anime. Man, my spelling is awful. Jeez. All right, so now we've created the query and we're talking to the anime API. Let's go ahead and actually create an import for this. So going into my selected anime right here, I'm going to create an import called anime recommendations screen with self-closing brace, and I'm going to pass it in a prop called anime ID, which is going to be equal to selected anime data dot now underscore ID, like so. Oops, there we go. And so basically what this just did was this prop will contain the ID for the selected anime, so then we can pass it inside of here, inside of this ID, and then get all of the recommended anime associated to the one that we're on the actual page for. So now let's go ahead and actually create the screen for this. So instead of selected anime, I'll create a new file called anime recommendations screen. Well, let's just leave it as that .js, like so. And I'll copy all this stuff. We'll paste it inside of here just so we have a good starting point. Let's change the name to the anime recommendation screen. Let's get rid of this, make it into a regular view, and let's give it some text that just says hello, just so we have something there. We'll change this to be anime ID, so we're receiving the props, and let's get rid of this, don't need this or this. We do need use state, and we do need use effect. Let's make it a little prettier, shall we? And that should be good. Let's go ahead and import it into the other file. There we go. So now if I click it, it should just say hello. Perfect. Alrighty, so now let's go ahead and start building out our recycler list view and display all the recommended anime. Now, I will be explaining what each of the individual things mean at the end once we're done building it, just so that we can make everything fairly straightforward, and then I can explain each individual thing in more detail. So firstly, we're going to create something called a data provider. So do const create data provider outside of my anime recommendation screen function. And this is also going to be a function which is going to return new data provider from RecyclerListView, and it'll have R1, R2, and arrow function R1 is not equal to R2. Perfect. And then after that, we have to create a use state variable. So I'll do const data provider set data provider is equal to react. Oops, we don't need that. We need use state. I think I imported it properly. Yep, use state. Perfect. And initially, we'll set it to be null. And above this, let's go and import the data from the query. So the const data is loading is equal to use get all recommendations query, pass it anime ID like a show. Perfect. And then after that, we will create something called a layout provider. So const underscore layout provider is equal to new layout, new layout provider from RecyclerListView, and it's going to have an index. Why is it? I think my shift key is broken. Index, there we go. Arrow function, set it to be 0, and then comma type dim function arrow, pass it dim dot width is equal to dimensions for screen dot width, and then dim dot height is equal to dimensions for screen dot height. Perfect. And then after that, we are gonna do a use effect, which is going to have a check. So if is loading is equal to false, and data is not equal to undefined. You can also do if data, but I want to be as specific as possible for any beginners out there. Set data provider, create data provider function called dot clone with rows, and inside here pass data dot data. And then inside of these array blocks, go ahead and pass the dependencies that it needs. So data and is loading. Perfect. And then we can go ahead and start building out our recycler list view. Alrighty, so the first thing we have to do is we got to give this view some styling. So style is equal to width, and we'll give it 250 and a height of 250. Perfect. Let's get rid of the text that says hello, and we're going to provide it is loading. So we're going to check, hey, is the data still coming in or not? So text, if it's still coming in, let's display loading, and let's say we got something, whether it's data or no data. Let's handle those contingencies. So I'll do data question mark, and inside of here we'll just put in a simple view, and if there's no data at all, then we'll just display null, because we're already handling this error inside of the trailer component, if you guys remember that from the last video. So after that, inside of this view, we're going to provide it some styles. So the style is equal to width, dimensions for screen dot width, and we'll give it some height of 250, and then we're going to give it a recycler list view tag with a self-closing brace, and here we have to give it 3 mandatory props. The first one is going to be layout provider, which is equal to underscore layout provider. And then after that, we'll give it data provider, which is equal to data provider that we created up as a use state variable. And then finally, we're going to give it something called row renderer. This is the equivalent to render item in flat lists. So let's give it some props. We got to give it type, anime data, and index. And then we will give it, oops, not like that. Let's do, set it here. We'll call it render list. Give it type, anime data, and index. Perfect. So now if I were to save it, it's going to error out. So let's just save and see what happens. Cool. So it's going to say render list is not a function. So let's go ahead and define that. So we are going to have to import a few things for this to work. Inside of React Native, I'm going to import touchable opacity and image background. And that's really all we need. And then outside of our anime recommendation screen, we are going to create our render list function. So I'll do const render list, and we have to provide some props that we got. So I'll do type, anime data, and index. And here we can do a const variable called anime obj is equal to anime data dot entry. So the way that this API gives you the data, you get an object and then you get entry and then another object. Inside of that second object, you have all of the recommended anime. So as opposed to typing anime data dot entry over and over again, we can just do anime obj. So after that, we're going to do a return, and instead of the return, I will do a view. And inside of the view, we are going to create a touchable opacity. And I'm going to set the active opacity to be 0.9. Finally, after that, we will do a image background, and we'll provide it a source, which is going to be equal to URI, which is going to be anime obj dot images dot jpeg dot image underscore URL. Perfect. And this is going to look exactly like the main anime list that we have in the homepage. I think it just looks cool. We have the information and the actual text over an overlay. So after that, we are going to provide the image background with some styles. So I'll do style is equal to styles dot tiny image, and then we will give this a view. Let's copy this once more, and inside of the secondary view, we'll give it a text, and whoops, there we go, text. And this text is going to be equal to anime obj dot title. And so the first view with a self-closing brace, we'll give it a style is equal to styles dot overlay. And the second one will do style is equal to styles dot I think this is push text to bottom. Yep, there we go. So now let me make it a little prettier. And let's go ahead and define these inside of our styles object right here. So I'll do tiny image is equal to an empty object. Then we'll do overlay, empty object, oops, push text to bottom, empty object, and that should be good. I don't think I'm missing anything. Nope, that should be good. Cool. So let's go ahead and actually apply these styles to it. Well, before we do that, let's see if we can actually see the data. We can see it. It's a little strip right there, but if I scroll, you should see right there some more data coming in. Cool, cool, cool. Perfect. Perfect, perfect, perfect. So for the tiny image, we're going to give it a height of 200 and a width of 100. Give it a border radius, let's do 10, and a margin of 10, just so we have some space between them. And then after that, let's give the overlay, so we'll do dot 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 style sheet dot absolute fill object, border background color, and we'll do RGBA, so we have a little fade behind the actual black. So we have RGBA 0.48, and that should be good for that. And then for the push text at the bottom, well, I'm just gonna go and copy it. It's a lot actually, but for the push text to bottom, it's just push position absolute, left 0, right 0, bottom 0, justify content center, align item center. And then finally, I forgot to give this one a style for the text itself. So I'll do styles dot text styles, and then provide it right here. So I'll do text styles, and we're just gonna give it a simple color, make it equal to white. Simple as that. And so now if I save it, we see that, hey, it's working. It's still not looking good because we want it to look horizontal, but we see the anime, we see the actual name of the anime. However, we don't see the overlay. I think I messed up with the value for that. Let me see. Here's RGBA. Oh right, I forgot one more 0. So I'll do 0. There we go. Now we see the overlay. Beautiful. Alrighty, so let's provide it some more props for the actual recycler list view and make it horizontal. Give it some pagination and make it look a lot better, you know. So firstly, we have to give it the prop called is horizontal, which will make this run horizontally as opposed to vertically. Perfect. But now we can still see that, hey, I don't want it to, whoops, I want it to be a lot closer. So we're gonna give it another prop, which is called force non-deterministic rendering. So now we can see that we have it all very, very close. God, I hate it when that does that. Now we can see it's all very, very close. Perfect. After that, we're going to give it something called snap to alignment. And we're going to snap it to be start. Perfect. And then after that, let's get rid of the horizontal scroll indicator. So I'll do show horizontal scroll indicator. And we'll set it to be false. So the horizontal scroll indicator is this little line that right there. I don't want to see that at all. And I misspelled it, I think. Let me just double check. All right, shows horizontal. There we go. So now it's not showing it anymore. Beautiful, perfect. And after that, let's give it another prop called can it change size. And finally, just in case if we're on a slower device, we'll do a initial render index so we can see a couple of results to be 10, and that should be pretty good. Perfect. So now let's go into another anime. Let's go to my favorite, Naruto, and we should see Black Clover, One Piece, Hunter x Hunter, Bleach. Beautiful, perfect. Let's go to another one. Let's go to Neon Genesis, and we see a couple more anime right here. Perfect. Actually, let's get rid of initial render index because I realized that there may be some recommendations that have like 2, for example, like Neon Genesis, Evangelion, Death and Rebirth. We only have these 2 right here. Perfect. So now we can get the recommendations for each of these animes, and it looks pretty goddamn good. I think so, at least. I also added disable interval momentum. This will help you out as well. But let me just quickly explain to you guys what we did, because we did a lot of stuff regarding RecyclerListView. So let's start at the very top with the create data provider. So you can think of the data provider as a function that defines data for each element. So for example, we have Black Clover is associated to Naruto. This is one element. We have One Piece. This is another element. Hunter x Hunter. This is another element. So initially, we're initializing something called create data provider, which creates a data provider. And then if you scroll lower into our use state variable right here, we set it to be null initially. And then once everything is done loading and the data is not undefined, then we can actually define, we can actually set our data provider to be create data provider, and then clone with rows, and then set our data to be whatever data is available. So in this case, all of these recommended animes will be displayed. Now after that, we have something called the layout provider. This is very useful because this can customize whether you want your layout provider to be how much distance you want between each element, what kind of height you want for each element. But for our case, we didn't really do anything with it. We just set it to be the dimensions of the screen for width and height. But if you play around with Layout Provider, it can do a lot of really cool things. If you want to customize, let's say you wanted to make this into a vertical recommendation screen, you can do that too. And then have like individual cells that have like the name underneath it or whatever, something like that. But after that, we have the recycler list view itself. And inside here, we have row renderer. So like I said earlier, row renderer is the equivalent to render item in flat list to recycler list view. And all we're doing is passing something called type, anime data, and index. Now, don't worry about type. We're not going to be really using it. I just put that there as a contingency. But anime data is the data that we're getting from the data provider itself. So imagine you're just sending in here, instead of saying anime data, you're just doing data.data. But we did anime data because it's just easier to understand what's happening there. The index, so if I were to click on this index right here, it would spit out the number for that actual item. As well as, this is the really cool thing, is so if I go into render list right here, I can pass in the index, and then I can get the actual associated anime to that index. So let's say we want Pokemon. I click on it, and then I can get the data associated with that. So I can get the ID for the anime that the API provides, the images, the title, whatever information that index element has. Cool, so we've covered RecyclerView at a pretty good level. I would highly recommend you customize this recommendation carousel to be whatever you want. Make it look vertically, give it some cells, whatever you want to do, you can do. You have the knowledge now to be able to do it, and if you don't, I highly recommend checking out the documentation. The link to that is in the description down below. And if you did enjoy this, be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace.